The sharp shout sliced through the crowded store, silencing murmurs and shattering calm. Tom's anger exploded at the quiet vet, leaving her frozen, humiliated. The air thickened with tension, eyes locked on the unspoken wounds beneath her calm. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Once, Tom Bennett's shout reverberated through the cramped aisles of Bennett's General Store like a sudden thunderclap, shattering the uneasy calm that had settled among the customers. The murmur of hushed voices grew louder as people exchanged startled glances, their eyes flicking between the stoic shop owner and the quiet woman frozen in place near the pet supplies shelf. Tom stood rigid behind the counter, chest heaving slightly, a fierce crease digging deep between his brows. For a moment, the rawness of his frustration hung heavy in the air, a raw edge born from years of unspoken burdens and sleepless nights tallying shrinking profits. Emily Carter's fingers trembled faintly as she clutched the bottle of medication she'd been searching for, the fragile relief it promised for the shelter's ailing animals, suddenly feeling heavier than ever. Her usual composed silence shattered, replaced by an acute awareness of every eye on her, some filled with sympathy, others with discomfort. Inside, a storm of conflicting emotions roared, the sting of humiliation, the fatigue from years of silent battles, and a flicker of something else, a quiet, stubborn resolve not to be broken by a momentary eruption. Tom's outburst wasn't born of malice, but desperation. The weight of running a dwindling family business in a town where the economy had all but flatlined had chipped away at his patience piece by piece. He had watched longtime customers leave, stores close down, and the lively chatter of Cedarville fade to weary sighs and cautious whispers. Every delay at his counter was a crack in the dam holding back the flood of his worries, worries about bills unpaid, about the store's future, and about the legacy he'd hoped to leave. To him, Emily's quiet hesitation wasn't just an inconvenience. It was the latest in a long line of small obstacles pushing him closer to breaking. Emily's history was invisible to most in Cedarville, but to those who looked closely, the layers beneath her quiet exterior told a story of sacrifice and resilience. Her service overseas had forged her into someone who could handle chaos, pain, and loss with stoic grace. But coming home had been harder. The silence of the town, the echoes of memories she couldn't shake, and the weight of caring for animals as a way to heal herself and others carried a heaviness few could understand. In that moment, under Tom's sharp words, the emotional armor she wore felt fragile, like a thin veil stretched too tight. The customers around them remained frozen in a liminal space, caught between the sharpness of Tom's anger and the unexpected vulnerability radiating from Emily. Some shifted uncomfortably on their feet, unsure whether to intervene or look away. Others felt a swell of indignation on Emily's behalf, their own unspoken frustrations with the town's decline mirrored in her pain. The tension was thick enough to slice through, a silent testimony to how small moments could illuminate the deep fractures in their community. Tom's eyes, hard and fiery moments before, softened as the shock of his own words settled in. He caught the subtle slump of Emily's shoulders, the way her eyes flickered down to the floor, and for the first time recognized the invisible load she carried, the invisible battles fought far from the aisles of his store. But pride and frustration kept him rooted in place. Apologies felt like a defeat he wasn't ready to admit. Instead, he focused on the rattling bell above the door as a few customers left quietly, the store's energy drained by the confrontation. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She knew the town's struggles were real. Tom's bitterness, a symptom of a shared pain she could empathize with deeply. But this public outburst, the sharpness of words so cruel yet unintentional, pulled at the rawest parts of her spirit. Her mind raced, wrestling with the urge to retreat, to shield herself once more, but also with the quiet voice inside that urged her to stand tall, not just for herself, but for the animals she cared for the veterans she silently supported. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking a long pause in the day's rhythm. Tom cleared his throat, stepping down from behind the counter to rearrange a stack of canned beans, avoiding eye contact. Emily gathered her things slowly, the medication now a heavy weight in her hands, more symbolic than medicinal at that moment. Outside, the wind whispered through the streets of Cedarville, carrying with it the unspoken hopes and fears of a town hanging by a thread. As Emily pushed open the door to leave, the murmur of conversations resumed, a mixture of quiet concern and whispered judgments rippling through the aisles. Tom watched her go, a sudden pang of regret and something more complex stirring inside him. Neither of them spoke the words that hovered between them, words about respect, about understanding, about the unseen wounds that shaped their lives. But the echo of that shout lingered, a raw, unhealed fracture destined to change something in both of them and ultimately in the whole town. News of the confrontation at Bennett's General Store spread through Cedarville with a force that belied the town's small size. Conversations rippled from kitchen tables to church pews, the event becoming a quiet but potent catalyst for debates long simmering beneath the surface. For some, Tom Bennett's sharp words were justified, the frustration of a business owner squeezed by an economy that offered fewer customers and less patience every day. To them, Emily's hesitance was an inconvenience, a momentary lapse that held up the line, and in a town where time equated directly to survival, such delays were unforgivable. But for others, the incident carried a weight far heavier than a minor store dispute. It was a painful reminder of the invisible sacrifices made by veterans like Emily, those who carried scars unseen and stories unspoken. Emily herself felt the old wounds reopen, wounds etched deep from years of service, and the battles fought not on foreign soil, but within the confines of her own mind. The quiet vet, once lauded for courage under fire, now seemed to drift like a ghost through the very community she had returned to protect. The sudden sting of Tom's outburst echoed louder in the silence that followed, reverberating against memories she tried to keep locked away. She bore the insult not as a simple slight, but as a brutal reminder of how thin the line was between respect and indifference in a town struggling to hold on. Yet, beneath the surface of her pain, Emily's resolve remained unbroken. Her sanctuary was the shelter where veterans and animals alike found refuge, a place where quiet battles were fought with empathy and care. Each monthly gathering of veterans there was more than a meeting. It was a testament to endurance, a lifeline for those grappling with shadows of the past. The insult, though heavy, did not extinguish her commitment. Instead, it galvanized a quiet support network that began to stir beneath Cedarville's cautious exterior. People who understood, who had seen the cost of service firsthand, started to rally around her in subtle, steadfast ways. Into this fragile but growing sense of solidarity stepped Marcus, an ex-airborne soldier whose voice carried the unmistakable timbre of leadership forged in hardship. Marcus was no stranger to Cedarville's complexities. His years organizing the local Airborne Division reunions had taught him the power of unity in a town fractured by fading fortunes and fraying social bonds. When he approached Emily with the suggestion, his eyes held a spark that refused to be dimmed by cynicism. "Why don't we hold the next reunion at Bennett's store?" he proposed, voice low but resolute. "Turn that place around. Show Tom and everyone else what respect really means." The idea struck Emily with a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. Hosting the reunion at the very place where she'd been publicly humiliated was a bold move, one that required stepping into discomfort and risking further division. Yet beneath the initial hesitation lay a flicker of wisdom. If the veterans of the Airborne Division arrived en masse, standing shoulder to shoulder in a show of strength and respect, it could become a powerful symbol, not just of gratitude, but of demand for acknowledgement. More than a gesture, it could spark a shift in the town's collective consciousness, challenging old assumptions and breathing new life into Cedarville's struggling community. Emily's mind raced through the possibilities. The reunion could be a catalyst for change, an opportunity to bridge the widening gap between those who served and those who had yet to understand the full cost of that service. It wasn't merely about confronting Tom Bennett or reclaiming personal dignity. It was about weaving the fractured strands of the town back together. In that gesture lay the potential to ignite empathy, to rewrite the unspoken narrative of respect that had grown threadbare with time. The choice wasn't easy. It meant vulnerability, a willingness to face the lingering judgment and uncertainty that clung to her like shadows. Yet, in the quiet sanctuary of the shelter, surrounded by the steady breathing of animals and the faint murmurs of veterans sharing stories of resilience, Emily found a grounding clarity. This was more than a personal battle. It was a chance to mend a community fractured by fear and neglect. As Marcus's words settled in her heart, Emily saw beyond the immediate pain to a horizon where respect and understanding could be reclaimed. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with risk, but also charged with the promise of transformation. In that moment, the weight of the past shifted slightly, making room for a fragile but determined flicker of hope. By the early morning light, Bennett's general store stood quietly, its familiar facade unchanged, but ready for an unusual day. The air outside held a subtle electric tension, a sense of anticipation threading through the chilly spring breeze. Inside, shelves neatly stocked and aisles orderly as always, the store awaited a shift that no one quite expected, but that would come to redefine its place in Cedarville's heart. As the morning hours stretched on, small clusters began to form. Not the usual scattered shoppers, but groups of men and women clad in the distinctive Airborne Division jackets, each emblem a silent badge of courage and sacrifice. They arrived steadily, veterans spanning generations, from grizzled old soldiers with weathered faces etched by decades of memory, to younger men and women whose service was more recent but no less profound. Their presence transformed the store's atmosphere in subtle yet unmistakable ways. The familiar hum of commerce gave way to something richer, laughter deep and genuine, stories shared in low voices that carried the weight of battles fought and bonds forged, camaraderie that filled the space with a warmth no furnace could replicate. The parking lot, once only half full on a good day, brimmed with vehicles bearing bumper stickers and decals honoring military units, flags fluttering from antennas. The veterans streamed inside in waves, filling the aisles with a purposeful energy that shifted every eye and ear toward this unspoken tribute. Bulk purchases piled high. Coffee, canned goods, batteries, supplies for gatherings, for those who still needed the basics even after having survived the worst. Tom Bennett stood behind his counter, a figure rooted in his usual no-nonsense posture, but the flicker of astonishment in his eyes betrayed the surprise brewing within. This was no ordinary crowd. This was a family, a lineage of courage and resilience, the living testament to sacrifices both seen and unseen. Their quiet nods of acknowledgement, their steady, respectful gazes bore into his consciousness, challenging long-held assumptions born of frustration and weariness. Tom watched as their interactions unfolded, not as customers demanding service, but as kin reconnecting, their presence a powerful reminder of the bonds that tie a community beyond simple transactions. Emily stood quietly beside Tom, the familiar soft strength she always carried, cloaking her like armor. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and low, meant only for Tom's ears, but laden with meaning. She explained that this gathering was about far more than business. It was a moment of healing, a reclaiming of respect and dignity for those whose sacrifices often went unnoticed. The Veterans Reunion was a bridge, an opportunity to weave together the fractured threads of Cedarville's collective spirit. Tom felt the walls of his own judgment begin to crumble. The woman he had once seen as hesitant, distant, now stood before him as a symbol of quiet bravery, a survivor of battles that extended far beyond the physical. He glimpsed the depth of her resilience, the weight of the invisible burdens she carried with such grace. Something shifted in his heart, not a sudden epiphany, but a slow, sure softening born of witnessing a community united in purpose and pride. As the day unfolded, laughter spilled into the corners of the store, mingling with the sound of shared memories and mutual respect. Veterans recounted stories of jumps and missions, of losses and victories, their voices weaving a tapestry of lived experience that filled every nook of the once austere shop. Civilians who entered found themselves drawn into the warmth, the palpable sense of belonging that radiated from this unexpected reunion. What had begun as a tense standoff had blossomed into a celebration of the town's true spirit, where civilian life and military honor found common ground, where old wounds began to heal in the light of recognition and community. From that day forward, Bennett's General Store transformed into something far greater than a simple purveyor of goods. It became a place of reunion, a beacon of respect, and a sanctuary for unity. Tom and Emily, once strangers in a fraught exchange, forged a quiet friendship grounded in newfound understanding and mutual respect. Their bond, subtle and steady, became a foundation for a broader transformation within Cedarville. The Airborne Division veterans pledged to return every year, their reunion now a town event that transcended mere celebration to embody the courage to change, to forgive, and to honor. The whole community learned a profound lesson, that justice is not always loud or explosive. It can be found in compassion, in the willingness to see beyond surface frustrations, and in the courage to embrace transformation. Bennett's General Store, once a battleground of misunderstanding, now stood as a testament to the power of unity, a place where respect was earned not through words alone, but through shared humanity and the quiet strength of collective healing.